All right. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are listening from. My name is Crystal Riley. I am your podcast host, Coffee Time with Crystal. I'm a real estate agent in Reno, Nevada, and I am an author, podcaster, and I am here we're talking about radical forgiveness with Kate Toye, and she is a self-compassion coach. So welcome, Kate. How are you today?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Crystal. It's lovely to be here.
Awesome. And so today, I had the pleasure of reading some of your stuff and then having a little pre-chat, and we were discussing, self-forgiveness and shame. And so can you tell us a little bit about your history, and what kind of led you into realizing those things? So we'll start with your childhood, right?
Great, thanks. So, my childhood, I was born well after my siblings. And at a very young age, my parents bought a business. I was 3 years old. And not knowing then, but now looking in hindsight, the business became the fourth or the fifth baby. And anyone that has a business might know that it is all consuming. It is stressful. It causes a lot. It's big.
Mhm.
And now my understanding is how much my parents' time was consumed with that business. I was only 3. And so there's definitely shame and blame attached to not having parents in your house, people being working all the time, tired, and you're a child that has needs.
Mhm.
And then there is a long stretch of my life that I was molested, and I don't really remember when that started. And I do know that for quite a while, and my understanding now, because I work in the realm of trauma, is that for a long time, felt like there was an X on my forehead. Like if something bad was going to happen, it was going to happen to me. If somebody was going to take advantage or inappropriately, it was going to be me. If and I really remember at one point in my life thinking, "Oh my God, is this everywhere? Is this everybody? And what's wrong with me?" Because I didn't see it happening to anybody else, and nobody talks about it. And so guilt is I've done something wrong, shame is I am wrong. So there was this really deep feeling of shame.
Mhm.
Something is inherently wrong with me. And so I also remember, this is becoming really clear these last few years now, is that I'm working deeper and deeper with trauma. I remember being quite young and hearing something like, "This can't all be for naught." And it kind of gives me like that
The
shivers down
chills,
the
right?
spine, right? And I always knew that I wanted to work as I grew. And then I had abusive boyfriend. And then I had just like, kind of your textbook,
Mhm.
that now understanding my original separation of myself and shaming myself, why that happened that way. And I'm really not about, I have no finger to point at anybody. We're all raised by somebody who was raised by somebody who was raised by somebody. We all are part of an education system that sometimes is set up not to hold kids at center. We are all part of a society that, when you look around, there's so many ways that shame and blame comes through our society, through advertisement, through social media, I
Mhm.
mean, my goodness, when you look at our society as well, there's so many ways that it's me that's wrong. I need to change me.
Right.
So, so with love, I say that I believe we all have trauma, and I really believe that it's all on, and I find it really empowering that it's on us to understand what happened to us, as
Mhm.
opposed to this thinking of what's wrong.
I like that. You said, how do you view it? Not what's wrong with me. What was the other?
Yeah, and it's not mine. I know I've heard it before, so I'd credit whoever said it. But the reframe isn't what's wrong with me. The reframe is what happened to me.
What happened to me? I'm taking notes because you're really good. I think that's important, right? What happened to me? Um, what because a lot of people that have trauma, right? And you've experienced quite a bit, your parents worked, had that business, and then you were probably, does that leave you with feelings of like abandonment or rejection or any of those, or did it? Right. So just to help our listeners identify some of the feelings that go along with that, right? And because I had parents that owned a business also and married to the business. Sometimes if I wanted to go spend time with my mom, and she had a cot in her office so she could sleep there, right? It's just, we had a 24-hour business. It's what you do. And so if I wanted to spend time with her, then sometimes I would put two chairs together, two office chairs, and take a nap. So I get that I don't know. It's interesting because I don't get to talk to very many people so far that have had parents with businesses that worked all the time, and they have all those feelings. And so to identify those feelings that go along with it, that's really important. You shared something when we were talking prior to hitting record about a kindergartner teacher. Can you share that story with us?
But I would love to. And before I do that, I would also love to share, I get our parents had to work. I totally understand that they were doing what they were doing to provide how they could. And again,
Absolutely.
there's no, right? It's not about shaming anybody or blaming anyone. This is what happened. This
Right.
is reality. What did I make it mean? And it was really funny. I didn't really process, honestly, until I was just talking to you in the pre-call about what might have that have been like for a kid growing up in a business. That, your parents are married to the business.
Right. And it's okay. I mean, so like I look at like my childhood, I don't have a lot of anger and resentment and bitterness towards my childhood. And a lot of people don't understand that. And it is what it is. And I can't change it. I can't fix it. It can't go back, right? You can't go in the past. So I can choose to be pissed about it, or I can say, we had finer things in life, and we got to travel, and I went to private school, and there was a lot of really good things that came out of it because we could afford it, because my parents worked their butts off to provide for us. And that was my mom's goal, was that she really wanted to provide more than what she had. Right. And so that meant working. That's just a shift, and that was my circumstances. So it's just interesting. So, but I totally agree. It's what happened, right? It's not what's wrong with me. It's what happened. And that's just the situation. And I think those are good words, because I don't think I've always understood how to put words on it. So thank you for giving me words to that. Right.
And we wouldn't be who we are if it hadn't been that way.
Right. Absolutely. I wouldn't. You're exactly right. I'm going to be careful with my words today, because these are interesting topics. So, okay. So if you wouldn't mind sharing about your kid.
Sure. So, kindergarten teacher, it was really rough. It was really rough. I remember things like being called stupid and an idiot. And I remember being pulled to the front of the line and to go, these were the 70s. This was very different time than what we're living in now. But like my hand squeezed at the front of the line, and really just, I was separated from my family, right? Really, kindergarten is separating a really small kid from their family, and a different adult who I'm not connected to in any kind of way has a lot of control over me.
Right.
And I remember seeing things like she would be different when the principal would come in.
Wow.
Like her demeanor would totally change. And I remember crying every day before I had to go. Every day. Every day I remember crying.
Wow.
And I remember my mom asking, what was wrong. And I knew I couldn't, because I don't know why I couldn't say, but I couldn't say. I didn't know if I was afraid. I don't know. But I remember it. I remember I had loved preschool, like loved it, like wanted to live there, and it was something completely different. And then when we were sharing was as an adult going in to advocate for my own kid, I was so aware of how small I would feel when I would go into the school, or how my head couldn't get words to my throat. Like it would be, a good hour later or two. And I'd be like, oh my goodness, why didn't I say this?
Right.
And, or my stomach would clench. And
Yeah.
a question that I ask my own clients and I ask myself really is this stomach clenching up a new sensation, or is this really familiar? Well, if this is really familiar, it's really not about what's happening in front of me. My body's remembering something.
Mm, that's important. I mean, that's a good thing for our listeners to pay attention to so that they can identify it. Because I think identifying things and recognizing your feelings, it's huge. And I don't know, a lot of people don't understand that, right?
And there's this, saying, if you can feel it, you can heal it. If
Mm-hmm.
you can name it, you can tame it.
Mm-hmm.
I do find that we're a society, and again, the blanket term of society. So give yourself self-compassion, that
Mm-hmm.
it's the society of a real disconnect from our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what goes on in my body. I know my life from my neck up. I hear that often, or I'm like, what are you aware of in your body? And sometimes it's, if we haven't gone slowly enough or patiently enough, it's scary to go to the body.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you just touched on something, and I don't know. So, do you help people recognize when they have, like the physical ailments or different diseases or whatever, and get to the root of those and what you do that work? Oh, that is so fascinating because I love learning about that stuff, and and it's interesting. So, like, if you have a hip problem, right, you have a fear of moving forward. I've had hip problems. And I kind of dug into it, and it's just really neat. And once you heal whatever it is that's attached to that, or whatever, you recognize it, and then you heal from that, you just move forward. It's really neat. Like back issues could have to do with not feeling supported, or they could have to do with finances, right? Different things. So I think that's really fascinating. So you'd be a really good resource for me to help people, to refer to. So that's awesome. Um,
And I do want to show there's brilliance in that field. Like, I love Peter Levine's work. He's written so many of his books, but he's written like Waking the Tiger. He has written, I have quite a few of his upstairs, but he is an absolutely brilliant man that totally understands the somatic, what's happening. And his work is called Somatic Experiencing.
I've never heard of it. I'm writing it down.
Brilliant. And then I'd also share Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score.
The Body Keeps the Score.
Right. And he worked a lot with PTSD and also what is stored in the body. And then my teacher Gabor's work, his book is When the Body Says No. And he really, when women are always, one example is by what you do in your life, people pleasing, always say, et cetera, et cetera. His research shows what like neurobiological diseases are related.
Wow. And that's When the Body Says No.
Yes, Gabor Mate.
Okay. Awesome. That's so that's really fascinating. Okay, so let's go back to I wanted to talk a little bit about you shared about the shame and self-loathing, and you take people from self-loathing to self-loving. I wrote loathing again. I'm really good at notes. So can you describe that feeling of shame that you were feeling and what that space looked like? Because you've kind of given a little bit of stories to it. Just describe to the listeners, and then we'll talk about how you recognized it and then got out of it, right? Because that's a process.
It is a process. And I would think, when I think back, for like my youth and teens and even 20s, early 20s, it's really hard to think of a time that there wasn't that part of me that was really shaming me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Shaming the way I looked, shaming the words that I said, shaming, pretty much everything, right? And really holding me back from things that I really wanted to do, risks that I wanted to take, ways to put myself out there. I love to sing, never ever would I ever want to. Like, really.
So what kinds of things did you say to yourself that you identify that as shame? Like, what would be a self-statement?
Well, hating on my body, hating the
I
way
don't
I
feel
look.
pretty. I'm fat, or
Fat, you're stupid, you're ugly. Why do you think anybody would want to hang out with you? And then I said I was with somebody who was pretty, very abusive, actually, and justifying justifying his actions, right? This is what you deserve. Of course, this is what, and really and I don't know, I don't know that there's any research behind this or anything, but I was talking with my son who's in his late teens, and we were talking about shame and blame and me with this person. And in a weird way, it was like this person could actually see that through me, this abusive person, all the crap he would say, it felt like a part of me was actually being seen, and it was a part of me that.
Well, it cut out a part of you being seen in what?
And the part that really hated me.
Okay.
This part that,
So it confirmed all of the self things
right.
you thought, and because you were with an abusive person, it just confirmed it over and over and over again.
All the
That's really powerful, right? Because how many people, men or women, right? Because women can be abusive too, get into these relationships and then they stay in them because they feel like that is what they deserve, right? And it's very powerful to get to a place to be able to recognize that that's just your confirmation. Like that's wow.
And that's just recent, that just kind of all clicked together. Right? It definitely wasn't back in I think I was only my own late teens when I was a person. But it really, because I understand the original trauma comes from, my childhood trauma, not being seen, not being heard, and your reality not being right. That like a child that, there's a monster under my bed. I'm scared. And it's like, there's nothing under your bed.
Right.
You're fine. Go to bed. As opposed to, oh my goodness, what can we do?
Right. Let's check out this monster. Let's get rid of it. Right.
What do you need? What do you need from me? Do I need to sleep here tonight? What can I do for you?
Wow.
Right? So if
I never even thought about that. Okay. That's so powerful. Like as parents, how we talk to our children that makes them not feel heard and validated, even though it's little things like the monsters under the bed. That's dumb, right? I mean, it's a valid feeling because it's their feeling. Kind of leads into what we were talking about prior to the recording of, you have a perception, I have a perception, and, whatever. And so we could be in the same situation and have two different perceptions, right? And it's
and two different realities.
Yeah. And what are we doing to our children? I'm gonna have to think about, maybe I need to go back and apologize to my children for some of the things I've done. Right? Like,
well, I realized for my kids that I really was what I call toxic positivity, right? Like they would express a fear, 15, 16 years old, tell me, this doesn't, the state of the world. And I would say, yeah, but look at where we live. We have a house. We have food in our fridge. We have I wasn't able to be with that fear in myself at the time. And, it was probably longer than 2 years ago. I'm thinking, 4 or 5, but I couldn't be with that fear because I didn't want my kids to feel fear, because I vowed if I'm bringing people onto the planet, I'm going to keep them. Right. And that's a really huge responsibility as a parent, to try to think that you can keep the world safe for your kids. I can't keep the world safe.
There's no control of the world. I mean, we have to be able to allow our children they have to be able to get hurt, right? I mean, they have to experience things. You can't wrap them in bubble wrap. That's my joke. Can't wrap my kids in bubble wrap. So I have a little bit different way of parenting that a lot of people aren't maybe in alignment with. Because I'm protective, but I'm safely protected. There's a fine line, not a helicopter parent, but I do care.
And my flip was, I can't keep the world safe, but I can give my kids all the tools to make sure that they're safe in this world. So what I realized was I couldn't be with the fear of an unsafe world. So somewhere in me was like, if I just get them over to focus on all the things that are great, right, then they won't have fear. But really what they needed was for me to be able to see, hear, and validate the reality that it is scary.
Wow.
Can we sit in that? Can you tell me how you're feeling? Right. And you don't leave them in that place, of course. People feel heard. And I trust that people know themselves better than anybody else on this planet. Crystal, you know yourself better than anybody. And if I sit with you in that space of allowing you to be heard, your own self resilience and resources are going to come up and, but I know I'm going to be okay because.
Mhm. Wow, that's really, really powerful. Imagine if more people could identify that, this world would be a really different place. So let's see. Um, how did you, because you recognized it, like how long did it take you to recognize that you were living in this space? Was there some occurrence that happened, or
Living
um,
in this space of self-loathing.
self-loathing? Yeah.
Yeah, I started backpacking and I backpack, I'd backpack and then come home and make enough money to go back. And I did that for about 6 years. And I got to do amazing things and see amazing places. And I remember being in Australia and feeling like I've never felt in my life, like so empowered, so happy, so full of self-efficacy and joy. And I ran into some people um, that I knew from childhood. They weren't my age, but they're quite a bit older than me. And I have no idea why. I never shared what had happened in my past with anybody, but these people have a person in common, and I figured it out what happened.
And you what? It's cutting off for some
I
reason.
blurted out to them about my childhood. I
Uh-huh.
had been drinking, and I have no idea why I did, and I did. And they said I was a liar and didn't accept it, and really shamed me. Like, why would you bring that into here? Is this why we got like it was awful? It was awful. And
Right.
I feel it in my stomach actually as I'm sharing it with you.
Thank
And
you for
when I
sharing.
went back to the place we were staying, like I had a hostel, like I was a different kind of a hostel, like a house. And I had great friends there who I had met backpacking. And I remember the next morning when I woke up, the what came through so clearly was wherever you go, there you are. And I was like, okay, I still have work to do and I can't run because wherever I go, I'm there.
Mhm.
So if I really want to be free, like really free, it's about me understanding me. And then that started my work in understanding self. And that was like a couple decades ago. And things were different then. Therapy looked different, approaches were different. And so I read every self-help book you could probably imagine. And I remember and yoga and meditation. And I started meditating at 11 and I would share that saved my life.
And you would
100.
what?
I would share that saved my life. Like
Medit
if I hadn't started meditating I don't know that I'd be on the planet.
Yeah.
And then I started all the self-help books, and then I yoga and all of the things. And it really it kept me alive. It got me to where, you know, I have a partner. I think we've been together 26 years. We have 3 amazing kids. And um, maybe 8 years ago, I was at a point where I would realize I'm triggered, but I'm aware I'm triggered. So this has got to be as good as it gets. And then I love the work of 𝐒𝐥𝐟-𝐋𝐨𝐚, and then he developed this approach called compassionate inquiry. And I had also before that been going to school as a mindfulness somatic wellness coach. And I love that world of mindfulness. I love the world of understanding your body. That was something new to me about understanding the somatic world. And then just what wellness looked like. And then also coaching is really about trusting that my client knows. Nobody comes to me and I give them advice. That's
Mhm.
not what it's about at all. It's really about asking questions, offering reframes,
Mm.
really coming up, connecting with those parts of you that have been here before and what have you done in the past? Or
Mm.
what if we ask it this way? Or is this a possibility? Could I get curious about that?
Right.
And so then when self-compassion or compassionate inquiry came about, then then I learned this whole new technique of going all the way back and sitting with myself as a young child. And what would that feel like to be 2 years old?
Nope,
And
it cut out again.
oh, I'm so sorry.
I don't know
What
why.
would it be like? Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, I know why, because my mic isn't plugged. So what it would be like to, what is it like to sit with a 2-year-old that's feeling alone?
Mhm.
Can you see how small 2 is? Can you see the size difference between an adult and a child? Like really looking, because what happens, I find, is we look through at our past through the eyes we have now, right? So we could say things like, it wasn't that bad, or it wasn't, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as so and so had it, as opposed to, but what was it like to be 2?
Mhm.
And that happens.
Right. I don't think most adults are not able to put themselves in that position to think of how a child would respond or feel, and they just think, "You're fine. Dust it off, rub some dirt on it, shake it off," whatever the stuff is. And so I know with my kids, I do really try to work with them on recognizing their feelings and like, "Okay, I hear you, but," or whatever, I do listen to them, and I've learned to ask them those questions so that they do, because I as a kid, I didn't feel heard, I didn't feel valued. You know, very household was a very different household. And so there was no respect or value or anything like that. And so I've really worked at having my kids, especially my daughter, she's very strong-willed. I love her to death. And man, she has got a voice, let me tell you. Um, and so it worked. Yay, did that. But there's got to be a balance, but it's important to help your children identify, what they're feeling, right? So that they can learn to cope with it. Oh,
And this work, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. And this work is about going back and understanding Crystal at 2,
Mm-hmm.
right? And understanding, and then for me, being able to wrap that up with self-compassion
Mm-hmm.
has been what really I have found in the last year and a half or so has really almost accelerated my healing and what I see happen for my clients, because we're really never, and that's the work of Christian Neff and Chris Germer. And I mean, we're not taught to be self-compassionate. We're really taught to think of the other person, take the high road, look at the situation that they're in. And a really good friend of mine who also is a wonderful author, Monique, one day I was talking to her about what was going on with my child in school, right? Like, and I said, right, but this person that continually bullies him, I said, he has a lot going on at home, right? His parents, his this. And she so beautifully said, and that has nothing to do with your kid.
Right.
And I think of how many times we kind of make it about our kid to take the high road, where I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry, this little person, that you're going through this, but you can't treat others people like this.
Right. Right. That's an interesting topic. So with kids with bullies, because if our child was being bullied, we can't necessarily go to the other person or the other parent and say, your kid's bullying my kid, because there usually is a lot of stuff. I mean, you can, right? You can. It's not well received.
Right.
Can, but it's not well received. So then that's a fine line, right? And then how do you teach your children? I mean, I mentor a girl too, and she gets bullied quite frequently. And so I'm teaching her, I'm working with her on identifying her feelings. How does it make her feel, and things like that. But there's not a lot of control. I can't call up with the mom or the dad and say, hey, what are you doing? Like, have a talk with your kid. He's mean or she's mean or whatever. Is there any tips? And I know we're totally off topic, but is there any tips that you could give on how to deal with that? Because there's a lot of kids. Bullying is a huge issue right now in school.
Mm-hmm. And what my teaching has taught me, and this is the work of compassionate inquiry, is who does this girl come and tell? Because for me, I didn't tell anybody what was going on for myself as a child. And when I found out things, and this really also is really what encouraged me to pursue learning compassionate inquiry, was some big things that happened to my kids and they didn't come and tell me. And I was really curious why I wasn't the safe place for them to come and tell. And is it because I went right to toxic positivity? Was it because I didn't value what they were like? I didn't validate their reality? Did I really hear them and did I really see them? Or did I tell them, hey, let's look at what that kid's going through?
Right.
Right. And so if their bond with me, right, because 𝐒𝐿 also talks about attachment versus authenticity. So if a child has to choose between attachment and authenticity, attachment wins every single time. So if I say, you're too loud, don't act like that around me, them being authentic, they're going to adapt to keep attached.
Interesting.
Right. And I think of how many adults still do that.
Yeah.
Right. I think of me in the past when my kids really want me to do something for them and I'm exhausted, but I want to stay attached. So instead of being authentic and say, you know what, I'm really tired, I'm sorry, it's going to be a no. Okay, I'll do it.
Right.
So for our kids, right, to think about, and every day I check in, am I making my kid choose attachment over authenticity?
That's powerful, right?
Right.
Really powerful.
And so for this girl, and I mean, being youth is very different than being an adult and doing your work, because as an adult, you know that you are in control. Right? I'm in control of what happens in this house. I know my house is safe. I know that if things are out of whack here, it's on me to align them.
Right.
And a youth or a child, they need their parents. That's how they survive. Right? How do they step into their authenticity when their real survival is about, it depends on staying attached?
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you. And for time's sake, I think we could just go on and on and on, because you have so much good information and I really appreciate it. Do you want to leave our listeners with any kind of tidbits of how, any tangible steps that they could take to get from that self-loathing to self-loving?
Sure. A really great practice. This is mindfulness self-compassion. Again, I shared who developed it and created it, and there's lots of resources, is to really take note of how you speak to yourself. Take note of how you speak to yourself and just become aware of, like, do I shame myself? Do I blame myself? And what I really love, I was doing a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and somebody in the audience said, if there's a name for it, you're not alone. Right. So sometimes we think, and there's, so I would really take note of how you speak to yourself and know that you're not alone in that. And that stats for America, when they did research, 78% of people say that they're more compassionate to other people than they are to themselves. So it is, and I'd also share it's practice. Like, I really believe life is practice. Like, I really believe life is a practice. And then self-compassion can be part of that practice. And just look at the words you use, that you use when you talk to yourself. And if somebody spoke to you that way, would you hang around with them? Or if you spoke to somebody else that way, would they hang around with you? And then just very gently, with self-compassion and love, just see if you can start to shift that conversation as to what's happening internally. I think that is a great place to start.
There's so much. I mean, we could talk for a long time about this stuff. There's self-healing, and that journey is incredible. And so I thank you. I have learned a lot from you, and I have a lot of questions, but that's got to be maybe for another episode in the future. So I appreciate you, Kate. Thank you. And you are a self-compassion coach. And so we'll put your information in our whatever it's called, I don't remember. So in our stuff that goes out, and I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate you very much. And thank you for what you're doing for the world.
Yeah, thank you. It's for the world. That's really big. I'll have to process that one. All right. Thank you.